From Hagrid to Dumbledore,
Attention!
and from Umbridge to McGonagall.
Boom!
Hogwarts had all kinds of teachers, lovable and hated, weak and mighty. And the time has come to rank them. Number 10, Sybill Trelawney. The professor of divination came off as a very eccentric lady. Most of the time it seemed like she barely knew what she was doing, and some people, including Hermione, thought she was a fraud. In fact, her lesson was the only one Miss Granger detested, and that says a lot. However, Professor Trelawney wasn't that bad. She was an actual seer. It was her who made the prophecy about the Chosen One that changed everything for Voldemort and, pretty much, for the entire wizarding world.
For neither can live while the other survives.
And Trelawney had another prediction in The Prisoner of Azkaban, which also came true.
He will return tonight.
Sorry?
It didn't take Harry, or us, long to understand what she meant, as shortly afterwards, Pettigrew escaped to reunite with his master. So yeah, Trelawney was weird, but not completely incompetent. Yet the next professor was still better than her in many ways. Number 9, Rubeus Hagrid. I assure you, it pains us to place him solo on the list, but can you really say that he was the best care of magical creatures professor? Hagrid had a propensity for introducing the students to dangerous beasts, which he deemed interesting.
They let you ride him now. What?
Unfortunately, he never realized the risks, even when people got injured.
I'm the teacher, I'll do it.
But on the other hand, Hagrid knew a huge deal about various magical creatures, so it wouldn't be easy to find another teacher as knowledgeable as him. He was passionate about his subject because he loved animals so much. What's more, Hagrid had the necessary skills to tame almost any beast he could find. And we can't ignore the fact that Harry and his classmates had fun in his classes.
There's no Hogwarts without you, Hagrid.
So if only he was a bit more careful choosing creatures, he'd be a marvelous professor. However, the next one also presented a danger. Number 8, Alastor Mad Eye Moody. We should rather say Barty Crouch Jr., of course.
I'll show you mine if you show me yours.
The real Moody was never a defense against the dark arts professor. It was Crouch all along. He was a Death Eater who planned to send Harry to his doom. Surely that means he was a terrible teacher. Oddly enough, Crouch was quite a skilled wizard. He played his role for an entire school year, and no one, including Dumbledore himself, suspected anything. And he also taught his students quite a lot, including showing them the unforgivable curses. It affected them a lot, but it was actually good that they got to see how those spells work, given what was coming next with Voldemort returning and all.
You need to know what you're up against!
We're pretty sure that if the real Moody got to teach defense, we'd put him much higher on the list. After all, he was a brilliant Auror.
Pray!
But we'll never know what kind of teacher he'd really be, unlike the next professor. Number 7, Dolores Umbridge. Although Voldemort was the main villain in the series, most fans detest this woman even more. She was definitely the worst professor Harry ever had. Umbridge didn't even teach her students one spell the entire year. So why is she not the lowest on our list? Well, because we have to give credit to her wizarding skills, which weren't poor after all. Umbridge had a great grasp of a number of spells, including the dark ones. She even knew how to perform unforgivable curses, as she planned to use them on Harry at some point. So, however much you hate her and this habit of hers, Umbridge was actually a powerful witch, in a way. But let's move on to more pleasant characters. Number 6, Horace Slughorn.
Merlin's beard!
He was one of the best potions professors Hogwarts ever had. Not better than Snape, of course, but we'll get back to him later. Slughorn had an eye for talent. He even formed the Slug Club, where he'd invite his best students, including Harry. The professor had a deep knowledge of his subject. Plus, he was a nice person and managed to build a warm relationship with his pupils. And even more importantly, he fought on Hogwarts' side in the final battle against Voldemort, which was quite a feat for a wizard of his age. But of course, the main reason why Dumbledore hired him wasn't for his knowledge of potions. It was because of his memories about young Tom Riddle.
But this is very dark stuff, very dark indeed.
And sharing them was crucial to the whole story. So we must give credit to Slughorn for that too. Are you ready to move on? Number 5, FILIUS FLITWICK. This little man was extremely well educated on the topic of charms. Every year, he'd teach a great deal of spells to his students. If it wasn't for his subject, we wouldn't have seen this iconic scene.
You're saying it wrong. It's Leviosa, not Leviosa.
And in the Battle of Hogwarts, Flitwick took one of the leading roles to protect the castle. Given all those feats, it's not surprising that he taught at the school for decades. Unfortunately, the next professor didn't have such an honor. Number 4, Remus Lupin. He's always been Harry's favorite professor, and for good reason. Lupin was excellent at teaching defense against the dark arts. His lessons were useful and entertaining, as well as practical.
Ridiculous!
Besides, Lupin was the one to teach Harry how to use the Patronus charm, which saved his life several times.
Expecto Patronum!
And the professor turned out to be one of Harry's father's best friends, which made their connection even stronger. The boy went so far as to copy his practice-based teaching style when he taught Dumbledore's army. Lupin had only one drawback, which made him potentially dangerous. He was a werewolf, and when he accidentally forgot to drink the potion that made him harmless, we all remember what happened. Lupin wasn't only an amazing professor, he was also a powerful wizard. He was one of the members of the Order of the Phoenix who only accepted highly capable warlocks into its rank. Sadly, Lupin passed away at the end, just like the next professor. Number 3, Severus Snape. On a personal level, he pretty much failed Harry. They hated each other, and Snape was often unfair to him and abused him verbally. But that doesn't mean that he was a bad professor. On the contrary, he was brilliant.
I can teach you how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses.
As we learned from the Half-Blood Prince, Snape even fixed some mistakes in the workbook. He was a strong wizard. He came up with his own spells, including some dangerous ones. And he was one of the few warlocks who knew how to fly. Most importantly, Snape was arguably the bravest character in the entire franchise. He was the only one to have deception skills high enough to make even Voldemort think that he was loyal to him. Meanwhile, he was doing everything Dumbledore asked him to.
Always.
Undoubtedly, if it wasn't for Snape, Harry would never have defeated Voldemort. And the absence of the next teacher would also have changed the entire story. Number 2, Minerva McGonagall. The Professor of Transfiguration wasn't one to tolerate fools in her classroom. At times, she could be quite intimidating and demanding. But in fact, McGonagall cared deeply for her students and encouraged them to do their best in her class. She was exceptionally smart as a teacher and as a witch. The professor was able to perform advanced acts of transfiguration. This one, for example, is totally worth mentioning.
Protect us! Do your duty to our school!
She was also an animagus.
Uh-oh.
And in the Battle of Hogwarts, the professor used all her expertise to keep the Death Eaters at bay.
I've always wanted to use that spell.
After Voldemort's defeat, McGonagall became the new headmaster of Hogwarts. This position suited her perfectly, as she surely was second to only one other wizard in the series. Number 1, Albus Dumbledore. The headmaster wasn't only the most powerful wizard at Hogwarts, he was the greatest in the whole series. Even Voldemort himself feared the old man. But what made him so strong? First of all, Dumbledore was exceptionally talented. After all, do you know anyone else who could work as both Professor of Transfiguration and Defense Against the Dark Arts? Because that's exactly what Dumbledore did before becoming headmaster. Whatever position he held, he was always an inspiration to his students.
Happiness can be found even in the darkest of time, if one only remembers to turn on the light.
Dumbledore was Harry's main mentor. He was the one to train the boy and answer his questions. Although not all of them at once, of course.
But now is not the time to tell us.
And when it came to fighting, he managed to defeat dark magic with a single spell. It seemed like there was nothing Dumbledore couldn't do.
Being me has its privileges.
What other professors would you add to this list, and in what spot? Share in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about your favorite Harry Potter characters, check out our other videos.